Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just saw Toy Story 4. Let's talk about it. So Toy Story 4 is directed by Josh Cooley, and I, like many people, absolutely adored the last entry of Toy Story. Toy Story 3 is literally just one of the best animated films of all time, and I think it's very, very incredible as the send-off for the Toy Story franchise. However, they did, of course, continue on with this franchise with the fourth entry, and I was, like many, a bit skeptical about this entry, but I have to say it is a very, very good time in the cinema. This film is... Pixar have done it again. This film is just, it's a very, very good film. And we'll get into exactly what it is that I really loved about this film. But firstly, this is going to be a spoiler review. This is going to be a discussion of the film. But without further ado, let's get into the good, let's get into the bad, let's get into the review of this film. So first off, I have to say, like I do with many animated films, that the animation quality has just improved so much over the course of the several decades since the first Toy Story film was debuted. And I have to say that you can really tell the impact of improved technology when it comes to the animation space. You can also tell the difference with special effects in live action films as well, but in animation where it's just all special effects, it's all design, it's all computerization, and you can really see the difference between the earlier entries of Toy Story versus what we got here, which is just absolutely amazing. The attention to detail here is just unparalleled. There are so many dust bunnies in this film when they're running around the antique shop, and it actually just made me want to sneeze just looking at it because of that attention to detail. I think it was absolutely spectacular. Secondly, you have the return of the gang, and they're just always such a nice ensemble cast to get back to go home to, because they're just a family at this point. They're just a little community, and you love them for it. You love their different personalities and the way that those dynamics work together. It's just a very well done set of characters. But I will have to say that a lot of them do take a back seat in this film. It's very much more a Woody film than it is any other character. Even Buzz, he definitely takes a back seat here. He has a bit of a side role, but it's nothing hugely significant in comparison to Woody's role. But first, let's talk about the new entry into the Toy Story family, and that is Forky. And in the trailers, it seemed as though Forky was this very existential, very thoughtful, philosophical character contemplating the realities of life and the purpose of his existence and everything. But actually in the film, he's a very simple creature. He has identified himself as trash because that's what he was made out of, and so that's where he feels he belongs, in the rubbish, or trash in America. So it's kind of an interesting look into these complex ideas through a very simple and childlike character, almost giving children a kind of surrogate character to relate to in order to delve into these really complex ideas, because they are complex ideas that have been explored in this film. It's just interesting to see it from the point of view of someone who's so simplistic and so focused on this one drive to end up in the trash, which is something that usually people wouldn't want to strive towards, right? Pixar films are known for having layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of meaning in their films, and when that's absent, people definitely comment on that. But I think that here it's interesting to see it from the perspective of Forky. I did think there was a high risk of this character becoming very annoying, especially in the first half of the film when Woody's doing a lot of chasing after him, and they're very funny sequences. A lot of the younger audiences in the cinema really appreciated them and they were laughing at them. But I did feel like I was right on the edge with Woody there in terms of his frustration and just get it together. But actually they managed to portray this character in just the right way to make him so endearing, so lovable, a welcome member of the Toy Story cast, and I really appreciated that. I loved him as a character. By the end of the film, I think he was one of the shining stars of this entry. I didn't love at the very end where they have one of those end credit scenes and he meets Bonnie's new toy, the one that she made for first grade, I believe, and it's kind of like the female version of Forky, and she also wants to be trash. I didn't love that because, one, it took the uniqueness of his character away a little bit, and two, that whole romantic angle where he falls in love with her at first sight. I didn't love that either, because to me he's just like a childlike character, so that wasn't very necessary to bring in a romantic angle, in my opinion. But like I said, this film is very much about Woody. He's definitely front and center here, and it's very much about his relationship with Andy and what he learned from that and how he can apply that to his relationship with Bonnie. Here Woody plays a very interesting parenting role towards both Forky and Bonnie. It's in the case of Forky, it's all about trying to teach him his purpose and show him who he can be now that Bonnie has created him and made him into a toy to be played with, to connect with, to experience amazing childhood memories with. Woody is the one to teach Forky that he is Bonnie's trash, because Forky is only able to understand things through context that he can appreciate and can relate to. And so because his obsession with trash relates to him, he's able to then understand what he could possibly mean to Bonnie. And I think it's such a selfless thing that Woody does, because all of these toys, what their desire is to be played with, is to have that enjoyment and that excitement with these children. And so the fact that Woody has kind of admitted to himself that he's not Bonnie's favorite toy the way that he was Andy's, but he still has an essential role to play in Bonnie's life in this new chapter that she's turning to, starting nursery. I felt like that was just, it was so selfless. It was so heartwarming. I felt like I've never liked the character in the whole franchise more than I liked him here. I just found him to be a completely different version of the character. Maybe I'm remembering him differently. He's always been the leader of the pack, but in terms of the selflessness that we see here, it's just pure sacrifice. It's very parental, and it just made him such an amazing character in this entry. And then of course on the flip side, you have him being a constant source of support for Bonnie, even when she doesn't consider him to be his favorite toy and she gives his sheriff badge to Jessie. He still has that sense of purpose to really just help her through this difficult time and this stressful time for her in her young life, and by whatever means necessary he does that. It's so amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that about this film. I think it was an amazing character arc for Woody to go through. At the end there, of course, you have that scene where Woody chooses to follow Bo Peep and become a lost toy and bring joy and happiness to many children as opposed to just one kid. And I felt like that was a very Captain America in Endgame moment. I got flashbacks to that old man scene. I was like, oh my god, is he gonna turn into an old man now? There's definitely a parallel there, because he did the work. He put in all of the effort to make sure that Bonnie had a great start to this new chapter in her life, but he figured that it was time for him to move on as well, and for him to start a whole new chapter in his toy existence and bring joy to a bunch of new kids and discover a new world that isn't just confined in the walls of someone's bedroom. So whilst that did give me those Endgame flashbacks, I felt like that was very fitting for the character. Bo Peep and her sheep are also great. I really enjoyed them in this film. She's never had a huge role in this franchise, unless I'm remembering things incorrectly, but I feel like she was always just Woody's very vague love interest in this franchise. She was never really a huge character in her own right. They definitely introduced Jessie as more of a substantial character with a bit more of a backstory, but Bo Peep, I just can't really remember her being that much of a big deal. They definitely did a bit of retconning on that front and explained her absence, and just gave her a bit more to do in this film, and she's very much on par with Woody in terms of her characterization, which I thought was very interesting. I feel like at times she is a badass because it's trendy for women to be badasses in films these days, which is a great trend. But I did feel like there were moments where she just knew how to do everything and no one questioned it, and it was fine because she's Bo Peep. But in terms of her character, I do think that everything just made sense. The fact that she had to fend for herself when she left Andy's sister's room, and the fact that she had to adapt to a whole new environment. I mean, we saw how atrocious it was for the toys in Toy Story 3 when they were in that nursery and having little kids just play with them haphazardly and destroying them. So I feel like it definitely made sense for her to have gained that tough skin, that hard layer, to really support herself and to protect her little sheep. And she made for a very compelling character in this film. I also enjoyed some of the new characters that they introduced in this entry. I thought Ducky and Bunny, voiced by Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key, were absolutely hilarious. I think they didn't have much of a prominent role. In fact, it was much less than I thought considering the advertising. But still, when they did say something or make jokes, it was very funny. Duke Kaboom, though, has to be my favorite new entry into the Toy Story world. I loved him. And you know what? I had no idea that he was voiced by Keanu Reeves. I knew from just social media that Keanu Reeves had like something to do with Toy Story 4, and I had completely forgotten about it. But then I realized after the film that he voiced that character, and I was like, yes, yes. That makes perfect sense. I love that character. He's so funny. I love the fact that even he has like a very tragic backstory of disappointing a child. All he wanted, just like all the other toys, is to have a very close, personal, meaningful connection to a kid, to a child, to bring them joy. And he hadn't been able to accomplish that. So that kind of constant moment of disappointment replays in his head over and over and over again. And I absolutely love that he kind of used it as a driving force at the end and kind of overcame that. Even he has just a really cool arc to himself. He's a great side character. I would happily watch a whole series about him, and even just all of the new characters, apart from a few which we'll get into. But yeah, I was definitely a fan of them. And like I said, the classic Toy Story characters very much had more of a background role in this film. So I was happy with the new replacements that we got. Okay, so now let's get into some of the things I didn't quite love about this film. And firstly, I didn't love the villain. I didn't love Gabby Gabby. Now, having to replace Lotso Bear was just, it's a task, because he made for an incredible villain. In fact, I think he was the best out of the entire Toy Story franchise. I can't remember the one in the second film. I can remember Sid, of course, but not for the reasons that he was a very good character, more because of that atrocious animation and the fact that he was absolutely terrifying and sadistic. But here you have a character who, again, she just desires to have a connection with a child and bring them joy and happiness. But she's also kind of a sadist, and she's also very, very sick. Like she's twisted. The fact that the film does such a good job of establishing that kind of twisted nature of this character, the creepy doll archetype that she embodies, with her puppet minions and their creepy horror aesthetics that really made for some scary sequences at times. They did such a good job of establishing her as this creepy, evil character, and the fact that she wants to yank out Woody's voice box in this terrifying operation scene, it just wholeheartedly convinced me at the end of the day that she's sick and twisted and shouldn't be anywhere near a child. But then they kind of try to flip that on its head and say, well, actually she's not really a villain because she just wants to have that connection with Harmony, the kid that she's obsessed with. But it's not enough. Like she's twisted. She's a maniac. I don't think it was very convincing for me to be actually sympathetic towards this character. No way. I thought she was absolutely creepy. Definitely didn't think she deserved that happy ending that Pixar was trying to convince me to be rooting for. Absolutely not. She should be locked up in toy prison. End of discussion. Also, a second thing is the fact that her voice box was broken because she was made in like the 50s and 60s or whatever. And so she thought if that was only fixed so that Harmony could hear her and want to be friends with her, so she would become Harmony's favorite toy, and everything would be okay, and screw the consequences of someone else's toy life being ruined, right? But then she discovers that that's not the case because Harmony's just not that into her, so she has to kind of deal with that consequence. I don't see why they then gave her a child to connect to using the voice box that Woody gave her. Like, I thought that was just so twisted, because the message there is what, like, if you do make changes to yourself, if you do fix yourself, then you will end up with the person that you desire to be. Like, I don't understand what the message is there. I thought it was very clever of them to just say, well, actually Harmony didn't really care either way. But then they tried to finish it off with a neat bow and it didn't quite work. It backfired, in my opinion. But I do think her character works to demonstrate just how far Woody would go for Bonnie and therefore Forky, because he was willing to sacrifice, and did in fact sacrifice, his own voice, his own unique characteristic as a toy in order to save Forky and get him back to Bonnie, because she really, really needed him at that moment. So again, it just solidified Woody's character arc and just made him he's just an amazing character in this film. Everyone else pales in comparison, but there are some standouts, like I said. And I will also say, as a final downside of this film, we don't really actually spend a lot of time with Bonnie in terms of seeing her playing with the toys. We don't really have the same connection to Bonnie that we do Andy, and I think that is because we don't really see her interact with each and every toy the way that we've seen Andy do so in many films at this point. Even at the beginning of this film, they dedicate a lot of time to a flashback where Andy was playing, and it's like, why would you dedicate that time to Andy, who's supposed to be in the past, when we could have this time more with just Bonnie and the toys and seeing how she plays with them? The only time we really see of that is when it's established that Woody isn't her favorite and she doesn't choose him to come out of the wardrobe. It's a small point, but it would kind of help to set her up as a better character, because for me, in my eyes, I still think Andy was done much better than Bonnie. So overall, this is just another great entry into Pixar's lineup, and I think they've done a very good job of maintaining the Toy Story franchise and just keeping it top level quality. I had a very good time with this film. The only question I have to ask here is, was it worth revisiting the Toy Story world in order to bring this entry to us? Was it really worth it, considering how amazingly they ended the franchise or the trilogy with Toy Story 3 almost 10 years ago, crazily enough? Did we really need Toy Story 4? The answer, I have to say, is probably not. I don't think it was a necessary part of this franchise. I think it's a nice addition, but I think a lot of the film as well feels more like a middle episode in a series of television. It doesn't feel like an essential season finale the way that Toy Story 3 did. It definitely feels like if this was Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 3 was Toy Story 4, I think the order would have been great, and all of the films are great, but this one doesn't feel like a substantial ending, even though the end scene definitely lifts it and definitely creates more of an importance to this film in particular. I just don't think overall it shone the way that Toy Story 3 did. And I did recently rewatch it and it holds up, man. That end scene where they're in the incinerator, no, that definitely holds up. It's definitely better than this one. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and give Toy Story 4 an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys what my thoughts were on Toy Story 4, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch any new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!